Good evening, everyone. It's exactly 6 o'clock, and we are going to start the session. We already have close to 200 people who have joined, and they are, as I can see, there are some in the waiting room. Uh, a very warm welcome to all of you, and especially our two speakers, Vineet Agarwal and Devendra Chawla. Vineet is the managing director of TCIL, one of the largest logistics company in India. And Devendra Chawla is the CEO of Spencer's Retail, and they're going to take us through on the subject disruption proofing supply chains. But before I hand over to Vineet to take over the session, I just would like to thank you all for joining us today and inform you about our upcoming sessions. Tomorrow we have a session with Dr. Ganesh Natarajan, uh, chairman of 5F World and former CEO of Zensar. And the other speakers include Mr. Dev Bhattacharya, Senior Executive President and Head of New Ventures, Aditya Birla Group, and Rashmi Ranade, co-founder, Studio Copre. They are going to talk about beyond COVID, relief to recovery to resilience. On Friday, we have an interesting session which is chaired by Mr. Karthik Sharma, who's the director of Agnito. The speakers include Mr. C.P. Gurnani, CEO and Managing Director of Tech Mahindra, and Saket Modi, co-founder and CEO at Lucy Diaz. I would also like to tell you that on the 5th of May, we have a very interesting session with Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, who's going to speak to all the delegates. I also want to thank our knowledge partners, Brij Mohan Lal Munjal University. Thank you for joining us for the Leaders Speak series. It's wonderful to have you. So with these words, over to you, Vineet. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Rekha, and welcome to everyone. These are tough times, and the fact that these are tough times is that Rekha has asked me not only to speak but also to moderate. So as you can see, we have to all adapt at these times. But it's been challenging, as you all know. And the format that we're going to keep today is that I'm going to speak for a few minutes on some ideas about what's happening with supply chains across the country and how it will impact you specifically today, maybe in the short term and then in the long term. And then I would introduce our speaker, Mr. Devendra Chawla, and he will take you through what's happening in the retail space as well. And then we'll open it up to question and answers because it seems it's going to be very interesting with all the things that are happening in supply chains and in the retail sector in this time. So just to introduce you to Devendra. Devendra is a gold medalist engineer and an MBA as well as an alumnus of Harvard Business School. He has worked in different leadership positions with Coke, Asian Paints, Future Group, Walmart, and now is the managing director and CEO at Spencer's Retail. He has been a mentor to many startups and is a keen observer of consumer behavior and has been has published his thoughts in many publications. He has been active in IMA and many other organizations. And thank you so much for joining us, Devendra. Can I request you to give us a brief overview about what you feel supply chains will go through in specifically the retail sector? Thank you.
Thanks, Vineet. Thank you so much. Thanks, Rekha, for having me. And good to meet so many people in the webinar. I could relate to so much, Vineet, you spoke, because in Coca-Cola, I used to also head the go-to-market function, which is supply chain as a full-time job. And currently, you know, what you said about becoming omni-channel is so real for some people like us that I don't think we'll ever be able to call ourselves brick and mortar stores. So I think I'll give you let me speak for 5 minutes on my take, and I'll draw from retail, of course, but I'll also draw from the larger perspective of supply chain, what's happening around us. And then, of course, we can come to retail even in depth. So I think what's true for business is true for supply chain. There's a saying, and it can't be more true than right now, that not the largest or the fastest actually, but the most adaptable will survive. I think this is the time to adapt. I mean, every day there is news coming, and because we operate stores in 45 cities, and cities have different time of store being allowed to be open, essentials, then phone delivery, then in some places e-commerce. I think you have to adapt every day and be agile. Now we all have traveled a long distance in the supply chain world, from delivery in a week, let's say a decade or 2 decades back, to now same day delivery, and even successful in delivering within 2 hours many times. And undoubtedly, we've become better at dealing with the high probability, low impact events such as defects or delayed delivery of purchase items. But I think today many operations are very vulnerable and susceptible to low probability but high impact events like coronavirus or COVID-19, which are occurring actually now with more frequency than before. And not just because of issues arise more frequently, but because issues that used to stay isolated now, I think have far-reaching impacts on this globally interconnected market environment. We have a chain called Nature's Basket with stores in Mumbai, Pune, and Bangalore, and we sell a lot of international food. And you can imagine international food comes from all over the world, from Spain, from Italy, from US. So it's actually an interconnected world. And I'll come to what Vineet, you said, local supply chain. I think that's a big trend. Even I see it happening. So such low probability and high impact, unprecedented mass disruption and what we call nowadays black swan events, I think they're capsizing the supply chains and causing a lasting damage to the function itself. Also in today's hyper-associated supply chain environment, I think the risks are evolving at a continuous pace, and they can strike from anywhere. Whoever could have guessed COVID coming from one part of the world and, becoming global. So I think in true sense, everything is global now, including the issues. And these are unforeseen times. So I say that we have a twin challenge to manage in business. One is that we are in a more uncertain world. We are truly in the most uncertain world. And we all in business used to have these phrases called disruption, and everybody used to use the word disruption in every second line that, business got disrupted or this category. I think truly for the first time in our lives, we are actually realizing what disruption means. This is true disruption. And second is rising complexity in terms of the scale, geography, the assortment, the range, I think regulatory challenges and customers evolving, especially post-COVID, changes in consumer behavior on consumption and whatnot. And I think these unprecedented events disrupt the supply chain, creating what you mentioned beneath the bullwhip effect. I mean, how do you forecast? How do you know post-COVID which items will sell more? How do you plan demand? Which suppliers to connect to? And that this is also due to consumers' varying demand and the lack of coordination and exchange of information amongst supply chain partners many times, starting with retailers and expanding, eventually reaching manufacturers, producers, and even suppliers. In the first and the second, in upstream suppliers, I think they suffer the most. The second and the third tier of supply chain are usually small. And I think the small ones cannot withstand the initial downturn or downdraft in orders or business. And I think this can be a big challenge for small manufacturers. Disruptive risks, I think, tend to have a domino effect, which we are seeing right now in the supply chain. I think any impact in one area, like for example, a supply or a fire happening in one plant or shutting off one plant in one part of the country, I think has a ripple effect in other areas. I think such a risk can't be addressed by holding additional parts. Historically, we've got used to cost being the biggest determinant of designing the whole supply chain. But I think no more, I think only cost can be a determinant as an efficiency factor. I think by contrast, recurrent risks such as demand fluctuation or supply delays tend to be independent. I think they can normally be covered by good supply chain management practices, such as having the right inventory at the right place. I think supply chain earlier, 10, 15 years back, or even actually till recently, was all about network balancing and network planning optimization, where cost was core to decision making for the supply chain managers to design the network chain and procure with lowest cost lever in mind. But I think the pandemic is likely to change this equation. It already has. And a new variable is getting introduced in the decision making, that you can't put all eggs in one basket, simply put. I think if something goes wrong, entire chain will get disrupted. Therefore, the emphasis will shift away from lowest cost in designing supply chain to cost optimization plus risk mitigation. We cannot any further ignore that risk may happen at a larger frequency than in the past. And I think relying on sole source suppliers or common parts and centralized inventory, I think makes supply chain more vulnerable to such disruptive risk as the time we live in right now. Although sourcing from and outsourcing to low distant cost locations and eliminating excess capacity and redundant suppliers may make supply chain more cost efficient, like, only buying from one supplier overseas. But I think such actions also make supply chains more vulnerable. Like for now, in a couple of cases, cold chain getting disrupted or ships being stuck, or in our case, trucks were stuck initially carrying non-essentials, and those same trucks were to be emptied and to be used for essentials in the early days. That was a huge challenge. And I think these have potential, and huge damage to and financial implications when they occur. Now, low-cost offshore suppliers with long lead times leave companies vulnerable to a long period of shutdown when particular location or transportation route experience problems, especially in the global world. I think so. What do companies have to think? Companies should think beyond short-term disruption to the long-term company survival itself, including supply chain, including having the raw material, including being able to source. So I think at this stage, it would be safe for me to say that the COVID-19 episode, I think it will lead to permanent changes in the global supply chain, including in India. And so going forward, the rules of the game will be to pursue both variables simultaneously, supply chain efficiencies and risk reduction, and not one. And how can one manage risk reduction? I think by and large, four things come to my mind in which we have to invest time and plan. I think one, you have to segment the supply chain. Two, you have to regionalize the supply chain. Three, and I'm speaking more even as a retailer, that you have to avoid extreme concentration of resources. And lastly, fourth, you need to nudge trade-off in favor of reducing risk by overestimating the likelihood of a disruption. You need to plan, you need to have it in the planning stage. And we also need to remember that no two disruptions are the same. So it's like a moving target. And therefore, no one-size-fits-all solution can be planned for the foreseeable future. And if I have to take a little bit peek into the future, I think it's about resiliency and an ability to adapt to changes. And I'll go back to that. I think adapting as a business, adapting as supply chain is the need of the hour in the marketplace. And new business models will evolve. The world will be different tomorrow. I think that will also be the key to disruption-proofing supply chain. I think we all have, in the supply chain function, we all have to come together to meet the challenge. I think in this world, the idea that companies can optimize the supply chain once and for all circumstances and for all customers, I think that would be living in a fantasy world. I think at the critical point being building resilience for the future. And that can begin with establishing a supply chain risk function like we started within Spencer's and Nature's Basket in the early days when the lockdown started. That first, assess the risk. Second, continually update what is the risk impact, estimate it, and plan for mitigation strategies. Third and lastly, I think overseeing risk governance. I think we also need to start thinking of the process and tools which got created during the crisis management period, I'm sure in all companies, that they should get codified into formal documentation. Like all of us have a BCP, sort of a business continuity process. I think even supply chain needs to embed in have its own document, and that document needs to be a permanent fixture to monitor supply chain risk continuously and reliably. I think over a period of time, Vineet, you mentioned that 2 to 12 months, and I completely agree. It will take that kind of time for us to know what is the true impact. Over time, stronger supplier collaboration can likewise reinforce an entire supplier ecosystem. Like for people like us, we are dealing with hundreds, probably actually thousands of suppliers of food, grocery, essentials, non-food, even though we're not selling right now general merchandise, apparel. And I think the only way forward, I will leave in the end, I think 6 points to my mind, which we all need to think, and no way is this exhaustive, but they come to my mind. That first, I think we need to integrate the supply chain. Vineet, you also mentioned that digitization of everything. I think you need to onboard the whole of supply chain on a digital platform end to end. So there's visibility. Second is to ensure the visibility of supply chain to your partners. Like we could develop a war room, our supply chain at Spencer's and Nature's Basket and our suppliers, the big FMCG companies, including the smaller one. So we could track the trucks. So we could reduce the truck turnaround times, because in the beginning, labor and truck was at shortage. Of course, at the front end, we did a massive tie-up with Ubers and Rapido and delivery, but that's a separate conversation. So I'm saying give visibility to your partners. They may not be your company, but the fact that they are your partners in the back end and the front end, it needs to be seamless. And establish the critical incident management team with symbiotic collaboration. We have a famous thing in retail called joint business planning. With the whole planning, forecasting what we're going to sell this week, this month, which category in summer, in winter, is jointly decided. I think that team needs to work now even more closely, because post-COVID, how do you decide that if it's summer is left, how much soft drink will sell, or if summer's left and people haven't bought summer clothes, how much apparel will sell? And if factories haven't worked, then how much of winter production will even happen for apparel, and thus how much can you get? I think if you don't work very closely with suppliers, it's going to be a challenge. Fourthly, anticipating and managing the evolving customer demand. And I'll go back to it. Some of the consumer behavior and consumption patterns have changed. Like I was reading, one of the category is down by 54% in one of the media reports, simply because of not being available right now. And 30, 40 days it's not available. So permanent behavior change have happened. Similarly, which other category, we have thousands of them which we sell online and offline, which ones will change, and historical growth rates of demand forecasting may not work. Fifth, control and optimization as per evolving needs. I go back and I spoke about it, like BCP for business. I think supply chain management has to have its own evolving and update time to time its own BCP. And lastly, I think it's all about culture. We all can speak as much, we all can speak what may happen in the future. I think eventually you have to create a culture of disruption preparedness. I think it all boils down to culture in the end. So I think these are my initial thoughts, and I think happy to have a conversation on anything specific as well.
Thanks, Devender. So, one of the things that has happened in this crisis is the emergence of, rather the re-emergence of mom and pop stores. And they have really sort of stepped in your local neighborhood, etc., for essentially servicing the grocery and the essentials demand. So the question here is a little broader. Where do you see retail? And perhaps let's talk about two aspects of retail. One is the essentials and the grocery, etc., and then the sort of the non-essentials. So where do you see both of these evolving with these new trends? You're on mute, Devender.
Sorry. I think both of them will have one common component to it, whether be a retailer in a mall or a neighborhood store, or you're on high street. I think nowhere, even if the lockdown gets over, let's say it's not as if everybody is going to rush out and life will be as normal. I think for a couple of months, we'll be in a sort of, I don't know, for a lack of better word, partial semi-lockdown, because you may not do everything what you used to do earlier. So it doesn't matter whether you're a modern trade or a kirana or a local grocer. I think everybody will adopt technology. Like I can tell you, we always had an app in Nature's Basket and in Spencer's for years, and we were always doing e-commerce and online delivery. But it used to be a minuscule part of our business. I mean, a very large majority used to still be coming from store. I think that's changed in the last 1 month. I think the mix of e-commerce, phone delivery, in fact, we've coined a new term in our reports called OOS, which is not out of stock, but out of store sales. So now we have in report two things, in-store sale and out-of-store sale. Because out-of-store sale has become so large that it needs to find its own mention in a report, the daily reports or monthly reports, which we review. And whether it's through WhatsApp, and we evolved, we pivoted, and we embraced technology. Despite that we had an app, I think the traffic went up. I can tell you one day went up by 50 times in our app. 50 times now. We had to work with our IT partner and make sure that the bandwidth and the space on the server is increased to be able to manage so much. And even if you see the local grocer, I think there's been a lot of tech adoption, and people may call. I still call, a lot of models are evolving and will evolve in the future. Like one globally, which is called, store pickup, or, it's also called as BOPIS, like buy online, pick in store. Even using a telephone is technology. I mean, you may order and then you go and pick it, or you may order and have it home delivered. I think technology is going to become common, whether you are a supermarket, you are a modern trade, you are a mall retailer, or you are a kirana wala. I think that becomes a permanent part of our life. So I think more of technology adoption, I think will be common to all of us. So that's my take on.
But do you think the mom and pop stores are going to be a challenge to organized retailers like yourself, or they will supplement organized retailers?
I think at this point of time, I think how do I answer this? Nobody has full stock, so I think there's no question of competing. I think in India, you see, India is a great country. Everybody coexists. There's always a kirana wala, there's always supermarket, there's always e-commerce. Like I always say that there are people using datun still, and using a dant manjan and a toothpaste and a mouthwash. I think we are a pseudo market and everybody coexists. I don't see the kiranas going away ever, and why should they? I think, and currently nobody has stock. So I think whoever has, I think we all are serving the needs as an essential. So at this point of time, I think even to be seen as competing, I think would be very unfair. I think we all are frankly together in this as an industry, I would say.
Now, in the past, a lot of retailers used to use basically gimmicks, or whatever you may call it, as marketing plans to sort of create artificial demand, like Sabse Sasta Din or yearly clearance sales, etc., which essentially builds crowd. And with that crowd, you are able to sell more because it's just maybe some amount of herd mentality, some amount of Indians love a value or a discount. So what will happen with things like that? I mean, how will we now have these Sabse Sasta Din type of sales?
So I think one thing is common to all of us humans. I think we all love to save. I don't think that's going anywhere. I think in the manner in which we save, or the rendition or the form of the sale, or in the form that there's social distancing and crowds may not be allowed, or you may not even want it. I think those answers are yet to be found, but no way I think that the saving mindset is going to go away. In fact, if anything, there's going to be more saving, I think, at least for some foreseeable future. Whenever there's a risk or any such large event which happens, I think, and if it's true, which we are reading, that, job losses or cuts in salary, or, even if you're not having one, when you read all that, I think this little bit of saving mindset does go up. So I don't think that's going to go everywhere. And whether it is e-commerce or anything, I think saving has been a part of selling. I don't see that going away, but yeah, you're right. It needs to evolve. So there are no crowds. How do you do it? You give it coupons, like some retailers have tried in the world, giving a token system. So you tell people that, between 5 and 6 p.m. only you 20 people come, 6 to 7 you 20. I think even people will also be careful not to rush at the same time, right in the first minute of the sale opening. I think if I take a guess, you have to accommodate and have a longer period sale. So you can only call like 20 people in an hour, so that you can have a longer period and accommodate everybody. Do I have answer to that right now? Maybe not truly, but one thing I'm sure, that saving mindset doesn't change with the COVID. I think that doesn't go away anywhere.
If you were to hazard a guess, just assumption, a year ago, if your sales were essentially only in-store sales at 100%, roughly, maybe a few percentage points lesser, but versus what's going to happen 3 years later, what percentage of your sales will be in-store sales, versus what you said as out of store sales, which could be a combination of delivered and e-commerce as well. So if you would perhaps hazard a guess.
So what I'm going to do, Vineet, is rather than speaking on Spencer's and giving out numbers since we're a listed company, let me talk about the industry, and I think the whole industry will have to do it. If they don't, I think that's going to be a challenge for them. And I'm also drawing from global peers because I've been in touch with even the global retailers. I think in 3 years, true retailers will have to bring in a lot of experiential, mode to the store, and out of store sales, I think will at least become 20 to 30% in 3 years' time. Right now, of course, the number is large, but that's also because we are in lockdown. Obviously, over the next 3 years, you don't expect people not to come out at all. So some bit of going back to stores will happen. So I think this number, what we have currently, will come down. But I think in the long term, retailers will have to settle at something around 20-25% of e-commerce or home delivery, or basically, delivered sales. I do see that happening in 3 years, and I think people will have to work towards it.
Okay, so there are a few questions that are here, and maybe I'll hazard a guess at one or two myself and then ask your opinion as well. So one of the questions is that is our country's supply chain really weak? And if I may answer that to some extent, is that the supply chains in our country are essentially, I would say, quite resilient. However, we have a lot of costs in our system, and those costs are attributed to not necessarily efficiency, building more efficiency, but there are wastages, or there's too much inventory in the pipeline. So what we as a country spend in terms of supply chain costs as percentage of GDP is relatively high, but still not as high in some other countries where manufactured goods are more. So I think that our supply chain is resilient to a great extent. However, because it has been quite domestic, not as exposed to international supply chains like perhaps dependent on imports or exports. So that way it has been quite okay. But going forward, as Devender said, and what I was also saying, we would need to build that resilience even more and more. And that would be building more efficiency in the system by various methods, and all of those that we just talked about. Any thoughts on this, Devender, in terms of, do you think our supply chains in India are weak? One example I can think of is that, the pan that you get actually comes from one place in Bihar or somewhere in UP, I think, and it goes to all over India. So in some cases, our supply chains are extremely efficient, and in some cases, it is perhaps sometimes very weak.
So I think, Vineet, I'll try add to what you said, because I completely agree with what you have said. I think supply chains also evolve with the category and the business. Supply chain cannot run ahead of the infrastructure development within the country and within the area where you are. It's an ecosystem: business, supply chain, supplier, sourcing. I think it's one and the same thing. Rather, I don't know whether our supply chain is weak or not, but I can definitely say that going forward, as it is, it had started happening, but now the investments which will come in supply chain would be far higher. If you see the future, like what are the future trends for supply chain, and I think that will give you a peek of what investments may come in, and that does not mean that our supply chain is weak. I think in many categories, our supply chain is, I think, very relevant is the word I will say, not weak or strong, because I think we are a different country than other countries. Our infrastructure is very different from other countries. So in that context only we have to answer, and it will be unfair to compare a developed country versus ours. But what's going to happen in the future? I think digital manufacturing will happen now, thanks to the COVID. Like I was speaking to somebody, and they would travel from, from Europe to China to meet the supplier, to give the specifications, specs, to get something made and give an order for 10,000 units or 20,000 units. I think digital manufacturing means you'll never travel to that country or to meet the person manufacturing for you, you'll do it digitally. You will have a 3D drawing, you'll upload it. There'll be a facilitator, a platform, a company who will make sure that, the other end keeps keeps the bargain and delivers the goods. So I think having suppliers across the world and without meeting, I think some bit of digital manufacturing will start happening. Then also you see the experiments were on, and even in India, in some of the companies, and though I don't want to name them, but definitely I think the next generation of touch voice, the graphical user interfaces, I think better integration of machines. And you mentioned we need robotic, another one is advanced robotic solutions. And they have emerged. I know of a retailer where in the night, there's a robo which moves with their scanners all across, and it just scans the barcodes and sees how much inventory is lying on the shelf. And it can match what's in your store inventory in book stock. Does it match with the physical or not? It can do that. They've already started such trials. I think then touch voice, graphical use interface, like for example, and I know that Google Glass may not be such a big success, but just to make a case, I think optical head mounted displays such as Google Glass, it can enable location based instructions to workers, like giving guidance for picking process, like what's where. And I think lastly, automation and autonomous cars, we've heard, though I'm yet to gather more information, I have heard that even in this time in the US, some bit of autonomous cars, self-driving cars have been used. And like we have contactless delivery that, we've been training our people that when you go for home delivery, you ring the bell, keep the bags, you stand back 6 feet so nobody comes close to each other. And in fact, we pivoted, and we had Uber, we had to train Uber people to how to make deliveries contactless. But can you imagine right now, there have been self-driving cars, people have experimented in the US to deliver goods and essentials in this time. So I think all this will come into India and make it more robust. And again, I would not hazard a guess whether our supply chain is weak or strong. I think we are evolving. And I think the future of supply chain is going to be, so much investment is going to come that I think it will definitely lead the development of infrastructure in India is what I can say.
Great. So just changing tack a little bit towards consumption side, more towards the food and the food side and the F&B side, since you have a lot of expertise there. One of the thoughts that has been emerging quite a lot with the growth of online delivery, food companies, etc., is something called dark kitchens and cloud kitchens. So I will ask you to explain that in a second, but I just wanted to leave everyone with a specific statistics on how that is evolving. In our country, the amount of deliveries before, post, pre-COVID, online home deliveries for food and a few packages used to be like Swiggy and Zomato, etc., was at about 10, 11, 12 million roughly a day. The same number in China is 110 million a day. Now, this essentially has retooled the whole industries around the food and beverage so much that there are people, the real estate companies, who have started building residential properties without kitchens, because they feel that people would just order in or maybe eat out. And if I have to keep something in my house, maybe I have a small fridge and a microwave. Now, that is a big evolution when it comes to retail. The impact to retail as well. So what do you feel about it, Devender?
So allow me to explain what you asked me. Though I'm sure everybody knows when you order from a cloud kitchen is something where people can't go and sit and eat, which is only takeaway model where, so think of a Domino's where only you can order the pizza, it will come home, or you can go and pick it up. In fact, in dark kitchens, you can't even go and pick it up. You'll only order and they'll deliver it to your place. So what it means is it need not be in a mall or in a very expensive real estate or a lane. You could put it within a radius next to a catchment in the cheapest real estate rent, and you don't, because customers aren't coming, you don't have to do fancy You don't have to do up the store or the restaurant in a fancy way. So you can keep down the cost, the operational cost, because customers aren't coming to your store. Still maintain the basic hygiene and make sure you deliver. Now, this concept has been borrowed from dark stores itself, which came in retail a couple of years back. A dark store also means where customers don't come and shop, but it exactly looks like a store. It has got shelves, it has got bays, but only the company staff is picking up the grocery or whatever, even non-food essentials when you order online. So you keep the cost low. Now, my take, Vineet, having explained what a dark store or a dark kitchen is, which is being used by Swiggy and Zomato, I think I personally, and this is my personal view, and I know you mentioned China, and I've been there many, many times and seen this myself. I don't think it will be one extreme. I think the reality will be somewhere in the middle. Like I, for one, don't foresee that the kiranas will go away ever, at least not in some decades, which I can see. That it will never be 100% an e-commerce world or ever 100% physical world. I think what has technology done, I always see as an ordinary consumer myself, see, when we meet, we talk, but when we can't meet, technology supports us. We can do over WhatsApp or we're doing a webinar. I'm just hoping that if this webinar works and everybody can hear us and there are 300 people listening to us, and then the truth should be that never in the future should there ever be a real conference where real people should ever come into a room together. But we all know that those days will come. Maybe not now. Maybe not for some months till the time we have a vaccine or something. But people have to meet. Similarly, people love cooking. I mean, it's not as if just because a solution is there to be able to buy from a restaurant that you say that the need to cook is gone because somebody else is cooking and can deliver to me. I think, of course, there is a crowd which is up for it. There is a college crowd. There is some millennials who will buy that. But I think home cooked food, cooking, I think to meet people, to go out, I think it's going to be omni. So for me, the reality is always somewhere in the middle. I never subscribe to extreme views of this side or that side. If you see globally, e-commerce companies have also bought retailers. All of them, all the large ones have even started buying either stakes or bought retail chains, especially in grocery, because the penetration of grocery in e-commerce even globally has been 2-3%. And even now, people do, even in this coronavirus times, if you see in Europe, in the US, even in India, people have come out and bought in stores, even though, of course, a lot more are buying online. So I don't think in like China that people will stop cooking and there'll be homes without kitchens. Maybe for 2-3-4% people, maybe, but not like majority. Not like, I don't foresee in the next 10, 20, 30 years that more than half of Indian homes won't have a kitchen. So, I mean, that's my personal take, but I don't think so. I think it will be together, this and this versus this. Coexist.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I have young children, and for them, the easiest option was just to order out. So rather than, it's you're right. So there's going to be a balance that will emerge over time. One of the challenges that we are facing as an organization is that how do we keep people motivated to go out in the field when, for example, they have to load trucks, they have to go in the warehouses. We run warehouses for lots of e-commerce companies and FMCG companies. They have to work there. Of course, you're maintaining physical distancing and so on, but there is a lot of fear. And I would think that fear in your stores is much more because you're in direct contact with consumers and customers. What are you, and I can share a little bit of what we are trying to do, but what are you trying to do to boost the morale of people as well as address this? And simultaneously, there's a gap between people, availability of people. So, how are you managing both these challenges?
So I think first of all, I will have to pay tribute to our staff. I think it's hats off to our staff. I think as much as I say will never be enough, because on the first day of lockdown, even when we were grappling of how to open stores or how much to do phone delivery and e-commerce and how to pivot. And we had started speaking to the Ubers and Swiggy of the world to outsource our deliveries because of lack of manpower. And a lot of delivery people had gone back to the villages, as we all know, in the first 1 week. I think there've been cases which make you believe in humanity, that a lot of our staff, without being asked, and because the first day public transport wasn't available, and by the end of day one we contracted dedicated cabs for us, and we sanitized them and made sure they only use for our staff to be picked up every day and dropped, which are even in force as we speak right now. I think you won't believe it, Vineet. People, so many of our staff walked for 7 kilometers just to come to the store. And later I went to the store after some days, to that one store where I met some of these staff, and I asked them, that like what was coming to your mind that you could walk 7 kilometers and the cops were stopping you. Day one, there was a lot of confusion, who's essentials, who's not. There were no e-passes, they were showing your card. I think they just wanted to serve essentials. I think it's so touching. I can't tell you. I mean, they didn't have to come. I mean, no logic of working for a company comes to fore. I think there is kindness, there is goodness in humanity. Obviously, all wouldn't come, but so many turned up on their own, knowingly that others haven't turned up. That first of all, one can never, ever, ever forget that in such times, we can forget about leadership, motivation for a bit and just salute the humanity in people, which it is at a grassroots level. And I'm sure, while I've been exposed to some cases in my company, there must be some like this in every company. Now, coming back, I think it's all about earning the trust. So we have many measures. Like we have doctors who are with us, and for every couple of stores, we have a doctor. Anybody who feels anything, we are making sure that they are seen. If anybody we hear, is slightly unwell, then you make sure that the staff gets quarantined for 14 days at home. You make sure that you have alternate staff, so no one group in supply chain comes in touch with the other one. So there are many measures you have to do, and make sure that you're picking them, dropping them, that there is a dedicated fleet, taking care of them. You make sure that you're in touch with the right people, authorities, to get any help if you need. So I think by and large, I think we've been able to win trust of our staff, because we started with 15-20% attendance, and now we're at 70-72%. And given that you're not running 2 shifts of 12-hour store, depending on which state you are in, stores are allowed to be open from 6 hours to, in some cases, 8 hours, some cases even lesser. I think this manpower suffices. And I think the learning is that, the virus is not going anywhere, right? So even after the lockdown opens, I think the whole world, not only us, everybody where customers can visit, needs to earn the trust of the staff and the customer. I think that becomes priority number one.
I echo that 100%. I think the supply chain warriors that our country has, and we've had in your company, in my company, in all these companies, many companies, I think it's absolutely have to salute their bravery in this case, and also their resilience in coming to work. We have the same issues, and from possibly day 3 of the lockdown, we had some of our operations started. And I think the mantra that we had, of course, was communicate. Communicate to people what's going on, because the fear has to go out only, and that can only happen when you communicate more and more about the situation, the environment, and what the company is doing. I think every person who's not at a job today, or who's sitting at home, or so-called work from home, is fearing for his or her job. They're not sure that what's going to happen. What is the company thinking? Am I going to get a pay cut? Am I going to be in a job? So I think communication has been very critical in terms of fear management. And definitely, I 100% agree with you. I think we salute these warriors that we have across our supply chains. So we have time for we have exactly 3 minutes to go. And anything that you want to ask me?
Oh, so given that you are a full-fledged supply chain company, how do you see the change happening. I mean, post-COVID, what is your take on transport? Like, because even we want to know as a company, how much of trucks will be available? How much of fleet would be moving? What about essentials versus non-essentials? Would you dedicate a certain percentage of fleet? Because essentials still is, it's not like completely normal world even right now. We all know that manufacturing is still at best 50-60%. It's not gone back to 100%, even for essential services. So are you planning any such thing post-COVID, like any plan after 4th of May? Or are you going to wait and then plan?
I've been part of several calls with the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Commerce Ministry and so on. There was one last night also, and we've been sort of trying to push that based on certain zones which are first, the definition of these zones need to be clearer, whether it's a red zone, a buffer zone, containment zone, a green zone. So and what activities can happen in these zones need to be clearer. So we've asked for that, and then not all companies are going to really move things in full truckloads. There has to be perhaps part load movement that has to happen as well. So can hub centers and transshipment centers be open? So there's a lot of clarity that is still awaited with how these things are being and going to get addressed. The government mandate is that there is no essential, non-essential, everything can move. But reality is it's not happening. And we know that at the local level, the government at the very, very local level, I would say, at the district level, the person there doesn't want any kind of incident to happen. So he or she is very careful about any kind of movement. So I think it's a lot of flux. We have plans that are ready to activate things as and when we know about opening up, but it is still very tentative. My sense is that in the next 2 weeks, things will be still very tentative, 2 to 3 weeks, and we will get more ideas post perhaps the 2 to 3 weeks. So there would be a shortage for sure. There would be increase in freight rates because there is a shortage. Even though we have diesel prices that have come down substantially, the government has not passed it on yet. So it cannot reflect into any cost improvement yet. So it's a matter of time. I think this is next 3 weeks are going to be challenging as well.
And Vineet, also as a tribute to, and I say this because I saw our supply chain team doing a maverick job. And, we used to take supply chain for granted, and, we come from a world where we used to say, jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai, like as a marketing term that brands have to fight for shelf space or attention. But right now, last 30, 40 days, it's been jo milta hai, wo bikta hai. People switch brand, jo mila. If you need an atta, you're not going to wait if your favorite brand of atta is not there. You need to make roti, right? So you'll buy. I think supply chain warriors in this time of coronavirus, hats off to them. And though I have seen from my company, our teams, with the ease and speed with which, because, in the beginning trucks were not there, labor was not there, and we knew some of the companies, FMCG, who had stock in their warehouses, but they couldn't ship it. I think our people arrange extra transporters immediately within a couple of hours and send them to be picked. And I'm sure all of you as a fraternity of supply chain, I think have gone out of the way. And so I think supply chain, the reliance on supply chain, how much we rely on it and the importance of it, I think has just come out in this COVID times. I don't even see supply chain, I see as a mainline business function. I don't even see it, we used to in retail say that there are support functions in business function. I think supply chain has become a business function. If there are no stock, you can't even run your business. So I think hats off to all the fraternity in supply chain, including all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Devendra. It was a pleasure to have everyone over today. I think the session went off, I would say, quite well. We've had still a large number of people logged in. So thank you so much. Rekha, any other comments, or we can close?
Just thanks a lot, Vineet. That was brilliant moderation. And thanks, Devendra. As usual, you were the best. So thank you both of you for joining us. We had over 100 people join us on YouTube, and we had close to 350 here. So it was a great session. Unfortunately, there were too many questions. We could not take them all, but there's always another time. So with these words, thank you all, and look forward to seeing many of you tomorrow again for the
Thank
IMA
you.
session.
Thank you very
It's
much.
from 5 to 6. Okay, bye.
Thanks, Vineet. Thanks for your time, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks,
Thank you.
DC.